USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. One of the great things about covering college hockey for so many years is you get to meet a lot of great people, and one of our favorites is our guest today.
And joining us now on the premiere of USCHO Spotlight this season, it's one of our good friends, the Dean of College Hockey Media, I think is the right term for Neil Koepke. He has been a writer for about 50 years. You'll see him and hear him on radio if you're in the East Lansing area, always talking Spartans hockey, the Big Ten. One of the most intelligent guys when it comes to college hockey in the nation, Neil Koepke. Welcome into the show. As we get kicked off here, this is going to be a big year for Sparty, maybe. They have a very good team, and last weekend, a couple of wins over Lake State. They started things off on the right foot.
Yeah, Jim, the program has really taken off ever since Adam Nightingale took over a year ago, April. Recruiting's better. The play on the ice has been better. There's a real camaraderie, and everybody asks me, what's Nightingale's secret? And I just say, well, you know what? Adam Nightingale is like the coach that's really friendly with his players, gets to know them, sort of like John Cooper has done in the NHL. And he's got that same swagger. He's young. He can relate to what kids want and how to be coached. It's not like the old, barn people that are hollering, shouting, the old football coach mentality that actually, had its way in college hockey for a while. But the athletes of today are different. And the Spartans last year showed that even with a new coach and a lot of old faces that hadn't done much in their 3, 4, 5 years at Michigan State, they did. They were 18-2, and were just one victory away of making the NCAA tournament. And that gave the fans here in town hope. And the fact that they started recruiting better, bringing players from the U.S. national team development programs, and also just kids that were very highly ranked among the recruiting services. So it's all fallen into place. The fans are buzzed. We had 2 sellouts last weekend for Michigan State hockey and many more to come. And people now, and I think the national media has caught on too, because it just shows from the 2 polls that I believe Michigan State is either 9th or 8th or so. And that has really been a surprise for a lot of people. But the people that are watching the program develop here are just not surprised, excited, and just hopefully the Spartans can be back in the hunt for an NCAA tournament bid, something they haven't done since 2012. So basically, it's been a drought here with winning seasons at Michigan State. Only 2 in the last 14 years or so.
I look at, you mentioned recruiting, Neil, and I think that's a big place to start. Obviously, Adam Nightingale had ties back to USA Hockey and the U.S. National Team Development Program. I look at their goaltender, Trey Augustine, comes in 2 wins last weekend, 2.0 goals against. He stops 93% of his shots that he faces. That's a number 1 top tier recruit. And that might be, I guess, when I look back at the last decade of Michigan State, what they lacked was getting that blue chip player.
Yep, that's right.
Obviously, Mon Arena, that's an old building that got a great facelift a year ago. That has to help in recruiting. But what is it that goes into Nightingale and his ties around college hockey that is helping the recruiting back in Lansing right now?
Well, I think one of the things that helped was when he got the job, he basically went out and tried to talk to college hockey people. Who were the good coaches? Who were the real good coaches that were assistants that have helped turn around programs, or that were good recruiters and just good people? And what did he do? He found 2. He found 2 in Jared DeMichael from UMass and Mike Towns from St. Lawrence. And basically, those 2 guys and Nightingale have developed such a friendship and a stewardship that they are basically just so much in tight with each other. And you throw in the trainers, the equipment managers, everybody. So it's a real happy family here, which wasn't the case for the last maybe 9 years under Tom Anastas and Dan Cole. It's changed the culture of the players. The players will go through a wall for Mike Neal and his coaches, and everyone seems to be happy. And you throw in the fact that these facilities are so high level. I mean, there's a hot tub, a cold tub, a walk-in treadmill, underwater treadmill, and there's a nutritionist down there to make breakfast, dinner, whatever, and a lounge and a big theater room. And so I would only think that maybe North Dakota's facilities in that regard are probably better because that's the state of the art. They're an NHL program masquerading as a college hockey program. But that's part of it. He picked good people, and he has a good sense of reaching out to people and asking for their opinions on people, on players and so forth. And then watching, going to see, and maybe just taking his time to recruit. But the Augustine thing that you mentioned, Trey Augustine, Jimmy, was committed to Michigan. And when Michigan traded or changed their coaches and so forth, actually, they just lost a goaltending coach that was really compatible with Augustine. And then in April, here comes Nightingale. He had known Nightingale from the program. So he said, you know what, I want to play for him. And he also known the strength and development coach from the program too, that was coming with Nightingale. And so what happened was I think, decommitted quickly, and within a week picked Michigan State over, I think he looked at BU, he looked at Miami, looked at about two others, but he really was intent because he's a Michigan, Detroit area kid. And he was one of the first ones to really say yes to Nightingale. And then 3 players from the program committed, a couple of players from out west in Canada committed. And suddenly you were thinking, wow, this is going to be a really good recruiting class. And even the one they brought in last year on a moment's notice, like quickly, turned out to be very good and very helpful for Michigan State to get back to the 500 mark, which they hadn't been in such a long time.
We can talk recruiting, but I also look at some of the players in this roster, and, hammering the transfer portal these days is almost a necessity. And I look and see Red Savage on this roster, who had some nice years at Miami. I see Reed Lepster, who won a national championship with UMass and is here as a graduate student now in East Lansing. How important is the transfer portal to maybe building some identity in this program as well?
It is a big part. And one of the players that also came along with the 5-player transfer group is Isaac Howard, who was at the program, played for Nightingale, and went to Duluth. And, Duluth's style is not really go, go, go offense. It's more go, 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 stay home defense. It's how they won titles, how they beat UMass and, in Buffalo. And basically he went there, didn't have a great year, didn't have a lot of, great skilled players around him that he was, treated with at the program. So he went in the portal, and without even visiting Michigan State, he committed to Nightingale just because of what he was building here. He knew they were going to be offense first if they could, but you can't play offense till you have the horses. And now Michigan State's getting those horses. But those, and then they have a kid, Joey Larson, from Northern Michigan, played 1 year there. And surprisingly, he was named honorable mention in the Big Ten all first and second team. He was an honorable mention. And you would have thought, guys like Dorworth, that was the leading scorer, Mueller, or even Daniel Russell would have been more visible to the Big Ten coaches. But they immediately picked out and gave a couple of votes to Joey Larson. So that's a really good positive too. So, and then the other thing too is 2 freshmen that are highly touted and highly drafted and going to be drafted players in Maxim Sturbeck, drafted by Buffalo in the second round from Slovakia. And he really is a prospect. He really is good. And then the even better one is a player coming from Belarus who played at Green Bay last year by the name of Lev. Let's see, I got it. It's a great pronunciation one, but his name is Artem Levshnov. Artem Levshnov. And if you look at Bob McKenzie's rankings for next year's draft, Levshnov is rated either from 4th to 10th, but he could be the 4th pick, a 3rd pick overall in the NHL draft. And he's a kid that really was wanting to go to college, but didn't know. I don't think he could have played in major junior because of the Belarus attachment. So he looked around for colleges, and the three I think that were involved there were Michigan, Michigan State, maybe one of the Boston schools, and Vermont, which surprised me, but he must have known somebody at Vermont. But anyhow, in the middle of like June, he picked Michigan State and was on campus on July 1st. And now, Jimmy, there are going to be scouts flocking to Munn Arena, following him just to see how good he can be. Last week, he had a goal and 7 shots on goal as a defenseman. And he really is a big, strong kid. And I can see why, the NHL scouts are highly on him. And obviously, he's going to be a top draft pick. So you add those two guys to a defense that was okay, not great, and now it's even better. You add Augustine in net, it's even better. Add those transfers with a bunch of guys coming back, that should be better. So now you have the makings of a team that is legitimately in contention for an NCAA spot. How far they can go after that, who knows? And obviously they'll have obstacles. Number one, probably will be taking 15 new players with 12 returnees and meshing it into a team that has chemistry and knows what it's doing on the ice with all this unfamiliarity to start the season.
Well, Neil, it sounds a little bit like not just in college hockey in general, but within the Big Ten, we have a bit of an arms race going on. You look at that league, Minnesota is back and strong. Michigan maybe having to rebuild some pieces. But then you can't overlook anybody else. Penn State had a great season last year. I think people forgot about Ohio State a bit. Notre Dame seems solid. And you got a big question mark up in Madison, but Mike Hastings is probably going to be fielding a much, much improved Wisconsin team. How can you even handicap where everybody's going to be in that conference?
That is true. And that was when I was not on any poll. There's no Big Ten media poll, just a coaches poll. But between Jess Myers and myself and a few others, we just sort of spun around and said, well, what do you think with Minnesota losing a couple of guys? And we both agreed that Minnesota, Michigan will come back to the pack a little bit because of the fact that they've lost, several key players. Minnesota's got it going with a goalie coming back, but they, lost most of their defense. And obviously Logan Cooley was a big loss. And Nick Snuggerud back. And Matthew Knies, too, obviously turning pro with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But and then Michigan looking for a goalie, a steady goalie. They've got a pretty good defense coming back and with a couple of new players there. And they've got some good offense. The main offense with Fantilli and Samoskevich is gone. So they're going to go through some growing pains here and there. And then you're right. Notre Dame has always been a great defensive team. So whenever you think Notre Dame's going to slip, they seem to find a way to be close to 500, 1 or 2 above or close 1 or 2 below. And then no one knows about Ohio State because they lost their goalie. They lost 3 or 4 scores. They brought in some transfers, but they're going to be a team that's going to be revamping itself, rebuilding. And Penn State, nobody knows. Again, they lost some key players too. They've got the goalie back, but again, Penn State usually has recruits that not a lot of people know about unless you're really into the business of following those kids. But then all of a sudden they come in and they're throwing the puck at the net and have 45, 55 shots on goal. So like you say, I don't know where to put them sometimes, but I do think that the big 3 will be Minnesota, Michigan, and Michigan State. But you never know because of the fact that a lot of those teams play sort of softer non-conference schedules. So they're going to get some confidence. And then when the Big Ten starts, who knows? They'll be knocking each other off. So maybe you won't have such great records, but you'll have teams that are really, really good and ready for the tournaments when they come.
More with Neil Koepke in a moment. We're back with USCHO Spotlight and our guest, Neil Koepke. Last year, going into the NCAA tournament and the Frozen Four, a lot of the rumblings around was about, now here it is. Here's the Big Ten. They're going to dominate everything. They're going to have the recruiting. They're going to have the name, image, and likeness money and so forth. Meanwhile, you look out to Hockey East, BU and BC are going to be right near the top, and they have really reloaded well. Does it now become a 2-horse race between those 2 leagues with the NCHC trying to play catch up?
Yeah, in a way it is. The NCAA, National Collegiate Hockey Association, NCHC, but they're still going to be good because North Dakota, I think, will spring back a little bit, even though they got an 8-man new defensive core and a new goalie, but the goalie came from Miami. So, yeah, I think the Big Ten and Hockey East are bringing back some of the blue bloods. Like, just remember, guys, about 3-4 years ago, when you would look at the polls and you would not see Michigan State, Wisconsin, you would not see BU and BC, and you'd be like, where did all the really top programs go? And for a while there, it was like, tough going with a couple of Big Ten teams, notably Wisconsin and Michigan State. And out east, you had other teams taking over, like Northeastern and Providence and so forth. But now I think those teams are coming back. And if you look at the recruiting that both BU and BC are doing right now, I mean, when you can recruit a whole forward line off the National Team Development Program, including one guy the Spartans wanted really well in Perot, but didn't get. But that's going to be fun to watch those guys. And then obviously with BU, having Celebrezzi and the kid from Eiserman, the one that decommitted from Minnesota. So if they have the top 2 players in the draft next year, BU, one's there, one's coming, that's a pretty good feather in BU's cap. And so I could see those programs just lighten it up. And then we're waiting for the other ones to, Northeastern to get it back together, and Merrimack's still there with the competitive, and Providence too, I think. But the NCAA will be good to watch this year to see how many really teams come out of there, because for a while there, they were promoting all their teams except Miami as being awesome. Now, maybe not so much, but it'll be, they'll get it back. And obviously Denver seems to be the stable there. Every year is right there. And just when you think they're down or not going to win a title, that's when they do it.
Well, there are going to be some pretty good teams that don't make the tournament this year. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I wanted to step back a bit to something you mentioned before about changing and coaches and players and so forth. There has been a culture shift, not just generationally, but around hockey in general. If you think back, I don't go back 50 years because I wasn't in grade school when I started following college hockey, but I go back far enough to know that things have changed. Attitudes with younger players, how they prepare, nutrition, being ready all year round. And it's been interesting to me. And I guess this is what I'm kind of wondering about is what you've seen with some older coaches being able to make the transition and others maybe kind of getting left behind in the culture. And what kind of things has it taken for coaches to really adapt to the current scene?
Well, I think the younger the coach, the easier it is, because they've been relating to their players, young players, coming out of juniors, coming out of like the, maybe coaching midgets for a long time, and understanding that the athlete of today, whether they're 13 to 20, is just a little different than the athlete before. And the way to get them to play their best, to develop and play their best, is a softer touch. Firm but softer. And that's what I think Nightingale has shown. And I think Nerado probably is the same way at Michigan. And I think if you go down the line, Bobby Motzko is sort of an old school guy, but I think he's adapted well. And Mike Hastings has shown his players love them at Minnesota State. And I think they will too at Wisconsin. Obviously, you got to get the talent. And I think that way, Wisconsin has a good way of getting back on track, especially with the fan base, the crowds, and so forth. And all you got to do is win, be competitive, and they'll come back, as we've seen here in East Lansing for the last 2 years or so, this year and last. But again, I think it's just a wave going through junior hockey too, major juniors, and even on the NHL level, you're getting different types of coaches that are more concerned about the players. And the old school guys like Babcock and Andy Murray, who was a very good coach, but a sort of a hard ass. And yet that wears off after a while. Now in college, he could get away with that, I think, because you're only there 3-4 years or so. Or now you've got the dang transfer portal. And if you don't like what's going on, you don't think your coach is not being fair to you or too harsh on you, well, guess what? You can leave. And that is obviously going to be something that coaches are going to have to deal with. So if they want their players to really be genuinely connected to their program and dedicated, I think you've got to treat them well, and they have to have facilities around that are very good. So it's a little bit of an arms race in facilities too, that everybody seems to do. I mean, they're just emulating college football and college basketball, and it's in some ways that type of reflection of football, basketball is great for a lot of reasons because it gives the players a lot of more ways to improve different type of coaches. But for the media, I will say college hockey is becoming a lot like football and basketball in terms of the way the media gets to players. It's all basically formal. It's you do have to walk in the locker room and talk to the guys. It's like, we're going to give you 2 players. Here they are. And maybe you won't talk to a freshman for like 2 months or so. So I think we've lost that a little bit, but I guess that's a sign of the times and maybe something that sort of has to happen in this society. But as far as the coaches, I'm really looking forward to the new coaches of the next 5-10 years because it's going to be different. And I want to see who are these new coaches with lots. I mean, look at Notre Dame. They brought a coach out of Chicago, the head coach there, who played there. Brock Sheehan, I believe is his name. And he was a guy that was actually interviewed by Michigan State's athletic director as a coach of the future, just to see where he was coming from. And yet Notre Dame locked him up this year. And a lot of people think that he will be the heir apparent to Jeff Jackson. And I think that is the type of coach where he's coached juniors, knows how to handle them, understands them. He's back at his alma mater. We would, just next level coaching college athletes is fun, and he's going to enjoy that. And then maybe when the time comes, he'll be taken over. But I think he's that new model of a coach that will be just a little bit softer. And it's fun to talk to coaches about that, even the veteran coaches, how they've had to change their ways and how you can't be too harsh on players. You got to support them, encourage them to get them to improve, to develop. You can't do it the other way by scaring them into not playing this weekend and because of bad play. They'll talk to them more and they'll have more communication. Remember the days when coaches would hardly even talk to you? And if you talk to NHL players, they'll just say it was such a business that I didn't know what was happening while I was sitting. And I had to ask an assistant coach because the head coach was just, play better, you'll play. And then that was it. I think those times are changing vastly, not only in college, but I think up to the NHL level too.
That's kind of pretty crazy, but it is something we see every day. Neil, before we let you go, I just want to kind of look at the first month for Michigan State. Obviously, 2 wins against Lake State. Now they're going to go to Air Force, then a home series against Canisius. So there's 4 games against Atlantic hockey teams. They probably have to expect or want to win all those games because they are, they're the October games that come back and bite you in March if you don't win them. But then the series that you can probably circle if you're a Michigan State fan, 2 games at Boston College against this highly touted BC team. It's an interesting mix, and maybe we say that the schedule makers get it right, get it wrong, whatever. This is something you make ahead of time. You don't know where teams are going to be, but this is now a very interesting schedule. The way things shake out for the Spartans.
Yeah, it is. It's 8 games, 2 at home or 4 at home and 4 on the road. And obviously, like you said, you have CCHA and then 4 games against Atlantic hockey. And you hopefully can get by those, win those. And then comes the big test, going on the road with all your new players, with a lot of confidence maybe, but against a team that's also got some confidence and some very, very good players too. And one of the side note there, a former Spartan by the name of Brett Darnell, who used to be at Michigan State as a player, then he was with Hockey Inc. For College Hockey Inc. And then the last couple of years, he's been involved with the National Team Development Program. He just got a job at Boston College. And he's a good friend. And so I keep teasing him. Your coaching life, you were born on third base. You don't have to go to Adrian. You don't have to go to, Miami. You don't have to go to Colorado College or Brown or whatever. You started Boston College. So he's going to be coaching against the Spartans, and that'll be fun. And then somebody asked me yesterday on radio, what series would be a factor where you could say this is a defining moment at Michigan State. The one I picked is Thanksgiving weekend when the Spartans go to Minnesota for a Friday, Sunday series through Thanksgiving. It's not a Saturday series because Minnesota has home football that day. So it's good. It'll be Friday. And Minnesota, by the way, guys, has beaten Michigan State 14 straight times. So I said to the guys, you know what? This year's team is really good, really better, improved. I think they'll beat Minnesota at least once and maybe twice. But don't hold your breath. Minnesota's had a big lock on State, but that'll be a determining factor. Where are they against the big teams? Because they're going to play Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. And those are teams below them probably in the standings at first. You never know. At Ohio State in 4 home games. But that Minnesota series will be very telling, because then after that, guys, they have one more series in the league, and that is a home series against Notre Dame. And then basically it's Christmas time, and then a really tough run in the second half of the season where they only play 5 home games and 7 road games, I think, and 1 non-conference game or non-league or a league game that's at Detroit against Michigan. So that's not going to be an easy second half of the season. So they better, line up some teams and get a good record so that whatever happens in the second half, they can still be in the hunt for an NCAA bid.
Well, it will be certainly interesting to watch from afar, Neil. I'm glad you get a front row seat for this Spartans team this year. It should be something special. But Neil Koepke, the Dean of College Hockey Media, we love getting to talk to you. We look forward to seeing you St. Paul Frozen 4. We missed you last year in Tampa. We know you'll be back. It was funny. Before we got on the air, you were talking about making sure you were going to go to Vegas. The one you skipped over was a city that seems to have a little bit special meaning to Michigan State. And that's
it does. Yes.
In a couple of years, I'm sure there's some good memory for Spartans fans that came out of St. Louis. So,
that St. Louis trip, I basically worked so hard, I hardly ever saw the city because dang Spartans had to beat Maine and upset BC. And it was like right all the time. Maybe you're right. Maybe St. Louis is some, I can enjoy it. And maybe on that Friday, go to a Cardinals game like everybody else.
Well, Neil, thanks for your time. Enjoy the season. We'll catch up to you again very soon.
Okay. Great talking to you guys. See you soon.
That's veteran journalist, broadcaster, and writer Neil Koepke. Jim, the remarkable thing about Michigan State, which Neil described so well, is what a change in culture and in recruiting and just an overall excitement there is around the Spartans program with the hiring of Adam Nightingale.
And I'll tell you, Ed, I think when he was hired, if you weren't an insider in the hockey world, maybe you didn't know who Adam Nightingale was. I think Michigan State fans were ready for some big name coach to come in, a guy who had a big track record in college hockey and all that stuff. Well, the reality is they got a guy that had a great track record outside of college hockey, but in the right places, working around the national team development program, USA Hockey. Adam Nightingale had the right connections. He did a fantastic job, and he's done a fantastic job not just recruiting and bringing in the young players, but as Neil mentioned, winning that transfer portal race in many ways this year. He's the early success story. Now, I'm going to say we brought up right at the end the schedule that they have. The Michigan State team has 4 games here, 2 against Air Force on the road, a very tough place to play, and then 2 against Canisius, one of the better teams in Atlantic hockey. If they overlook either of these teams, they could find themselves on the wrong end of the decision. And that's something, if you're trying to make an NCAA tournament coming out of the Big Ten, competitive league and league play, you've got to find a way to win your non-conference games. Took care of business at home against Lake State, but these next 4 games, as much as that BC series at the end of the month probably looms in their mind, the next 4 games and taking care of business against Atlantic hockey teams is critical for this Michigan State club.
It just feels like everybody is getting better, and the question is going to be, who got better the most?
I can't disagree with you. We said it on Monday that we thought that Michigan State was the most improved team in the country. I kind of, believe that. I look at the way this team improved and the personnel they brought in. They certainly improved a lot, but it's always a race to who can improve the most. And if you're good, what do you have to do to stay good? We talked about maybe some steps back that Minnesota and Michigan might take, losing some players. But if all of these teams in the Big Ten can stay around the top of where we think they could be as programs, the Big Ten is such a threatening league. To be 7 teams top to bottom that at least out of conference can dominate. Then within the conference, it'll be a lot of unfortunately cannibalization where every team is beating up on one another. That's what we kind of have to keep an eye on is what happens within league play. Because can 2 teams, 3 teams run away with things, or is it going to be 7 teams all sitting around 500 in league play? That's interesting to me.
Our thanks to our friend Neil Koepke for joining us today. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Spotlight.